tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. It's the lunar observance night, the half moon, and it's November 19th, 2019. Guess what's coming to mind is some Sangha Nusati, just thinking during the meditation that before I came to this, before I came here, I never would have imagined there was people like Luang Por Liam in the world, or even people following people like that, people who were keeping precepts or living some sort of principled life. And now it seems obvious that keeping precepts and being virtuous is the way to go, but it just wasn't so obvious before. It needed to be pointed out. These things need to be pointed out, and then it's kind of like we say, oh yeah, that's how to do it, that's how to live. And then when we live in the Sangha or close to the Sangha, and then we eventually develop some noble qualities, and if we stick with it long enough, then we're sure to develop. If we don't give up, if we stick with it long enough, that's why we have this period of basic training. It's the Anagarika year, the novice year, and then the 5 years as a bhikkhu, and anybody who makes it past their 5th year as a bhikkhu, that's why even now at Wat Pah Pong you get called Ajahn after 5. In the West you get called Ajahn after 10, but even still at Wat Pah Pong it's after 5 up till the present day. And certainly with Luang Por Chah, if you made it past 5 vasas, you were gang, you were someone who you had to have something to get that far back then. Sangha Nusati. Thinking back too, just the continuity of Sangha since the time of the Buddha, it's amazing that it's lasted so long. And there's been periods of time in history when it was perhaps just hanging by a thread and only a few monks, a few bhikkhus carrying it through different periods in history. So just, incredible to have what we have now. And just this kind of developing this sense of awe and wonder at the Buddhasasana and all the good things it does for us and it does for the world. Another thing I like to think about is just panya, wisdom, discernment, and the subtlety and the difficulty of really seeing things clearly. It's like if you take something like not self, so something like we might think the body is self, just taking something simple like that, a simple idea, the body is self, or taking this body to be ours, something that belongs to us. And the huge majority of people in the world believe this and are sure about it, and yet it's not the case, it's not the truth. So the Buddha comes and points out the body is not self. The 5 khandhas, the body and mind, are not self, not ours, not me, not mine. But the huge majority of people in the world believe this, and so we might be inclined to believe it as well, just because the huge majority of people in the world believe it, and wanting to just go with the herd, go with the party line, that the body is self, the mind is self, the body is ours, the mind is ours. But the Buddha comes along and says, well, I've seen for myself that that isn't the case. So it's kind of radical, actually, to have faith in that one person can come along and say the 5 khandhas are not self, and then that we would even be inclined to believe that or follow that. But there's something inside us that has some sort of intuitive notion that that is the case. So then it's almost like we're following a scent, and can't really put it into words, but something about it seems right. So we keep going in that direction. As time goes on, as we keep practicing, it's kind of like, maybe the Buddha was actually right. Desire actually does cause suffering. The 5 khandhas actually are not self. So it's like we start practicing, but then we intellectually, we may have been inspired by reading Luang-Por Cha or reading about the life of the Buddha or some other Dhamma book, and we get inspired, we want to join the monastery, we want to practice, but then deep inside, the heart doesn't really accept it or believe it yet. So even though we might come to the monastery and start practicing and intellectually believe these ideas, the heart doesn't yet know. So the panya, or the discernment, isn't yet there. We might have the sila that gives us sort of a ground to stand on and a basis of at least some ease and well-being. At least we don't have the suffering connected with killing or stealing or sexual misconduct or using false speech, being dishonest and having to go through the suffering of holding up our story and trying to remember what we told this person and that person, so somehow our story holds up. So we let go of any suffering connected with those things, or with taking intoxicants, the whole chunk of suffering that we cut out from not engaging in that realm. So we have some sort of ease and well-being, some sort of ground to stand on, and then we might even develop samadhi, mental stability, firmness. But for the panya, the discernment, and that's very much connected with right view, it takes a lot of study, a lot of questioning. My personal opinion is that we really do need to study the suttas and study the teachings of the Ajahns and their biographies, and really think about the Dhamma quite a bit in order to start to develop this discernment. And when we think about the Dhamma a lot and try to have the Dhamma be the subject of our thinking throughout the day, we're always going to be thinking about something where our minds aren't just blank. So we're thinking about something during the day. So trying to trying to bring Dhamma into it somehow. Even if the mind is distracted, then saying, oh yeah, distraction is like this, and then it's felt in the body in this way, and so you're bringing the mindfulness into it. And discernment isn't like some piece of knowledge that we acquire. It's not like the right one little piece of knowledge that we acquire and then we kind of understand everything, but it's more like a flow. It's more like the mind is held in a certain way that allows us to flow through life with a sense of non-clinging. So that's more, discernment is more, I guess, like a posture or a way of holding the mind, a way of being. I guess you could say it's discerning anicca, it's discerning impermanence, discerning inconstancy or uncertainty. So when the mind is held with a kind of discernment of inconstancy and uncertainty, then it doesn't stick as much, it doesn't cling to things as much. And it takes a lot of work, so even if say coarser attachments or clinging, if that falls away, then still there's the subtle attachments that are deeply rooted in the heart, things that we may not have been aware of at first, just habitual tendencies and emotional tendencies and things that have been tripping us up for a long time. So then we start to address those. That was and then that allows us to be in the present and be of benefit. So it seems like everybody wants to be of benefit somehow. Benefit to ourselves, benefit to the world. That's just how to do that. One thing the Buddha recommended is also recollecting our own virtue. I guess that would be part of Sangha Nusati, because Sangha just means community, so we're all part of the Sangha. And recollecting our own virtue is very much part of that. Or good things we may have done that sometimes we don't want to give ourselves credit. We might think like, oh, that's kind of selfish or something. It's like the other day I asked to meet with Debbie at tea time, and then we're talking later, and I said, yeah, I think that's the first time I ever asked to have tea with you before. She said, no, well, actually, before you went to Thailand for 4 years, so back in 2008, you asked me to have tea with you. And actually, when you were leaving, you asked everybody to have tea with you. And I had totally forgotten about that. And that made me feel really good, so thank you for reminding me of that. And so just remembering just little good things we may have done, it's easy to forget. And it builds up over time. And the Buddha said this is like karma that generates heaven. So we live at ease. We live at ease in this lifetime, and then if there is another lifetime, then we're also at ease in the future. I guess it's easy to kind of fear the future. But then, is that really helpful? Is that helpful in the present? Everything we're doing, taking Dhamma into it, is it of benefit in the present? Seeing like all these states in the present and investigating, what is fear? What is desire? What's actually going on in the mind? What's the process that's actually taking place? For sure, it's not what we think. It's not the verbalization, or it's not the actual process happening in the background is more like dependent origination. It's not the sort of plans or aspirations that we have. This is dependent origination happening in the background, and anything we're thinking it's more a manifestation of that. And so we have to be careful and investigate these things. Like when the Thai Ajahns would give advice, a lot of the time all they say is just be really careful and investigate very carefully, and be really careful with the precepts, be really careful with the meditation, be really careful with the development of discernment. Recollection of generosity, that's another one. I like to think that a lot of what we do at Abhayagiri is actually Dhammadana. It's a high form of generosity. Even the service that we do, a lot of the work that we do in the monastery, all of it it's not necessarily for the sake of working or being active. It's just doing all these things, whether it's looking after the water system or fixing whatever in the monastery. It's all so that we can live here at ease. It's so we can keeping the precepts. It's so we can keep living as virtuous people. It's so we can provide an environment where the practice can really happen and these things can really ripen. So that's like Dhammadana. That's not just the giving of service or the giving of material things, but in a way, it's the giving of Dhamma. So a lot of us, the kind of work we're engaged in here, it's actually Dhammadana. And then there's the more direct Dhammadana, the sending of books out to people. It's kind of interesting too, the way we have guests come here, and like pretty unique in the world. There's no charge. We don't ask for anything. We don't ask even for donations. It's free will donations, people who come here. The food, people just plug in to whatever everyone else here is doing, the schedule, preparing the meal, helping with work or whatever. But keeping the precepts, everybody who comes here has to keep the 8 precepts. So, in a way, we're actually paying people to be virtuous. So all the guests who come here, we're actually paying you to keep the precepts by not asking for anything. We're actually almost like we're paying people to read Dhamma books. I think this is the only monastery I know of where we send people books. We don't ask for anything. Many times they send us postage or checks in the mail out of gratitude and thanking us for sending the books, but we actually have a publishing fund and we send Dhamma books to people upon request, and we send hundreds, if not thousands, of Dhamma books to prisoners. So the Dhamma Dana goes out in that way, and that's benefit. That's real benefit. That kind of work. Going around planting seeds. We never really know how that's going to ripen too. When we plant these seeds, we never really know what the final result is going to be. One person might read a Dhamma book, and if we send out 5,000 Dhamma books and one person reads a Dhamma book and attains insight, then it's more than worth it. Because then that one person becomes a vessel for the teachings. So people can come here as guests, and we're not asking for anything at all, just to keep the precepts, plug in with the daily schedule. And that's of benefit. That's of benefit to the world. If people can just learn about the precepts, learn how to keep the precepts. Not to speak of developing right view and samadhi and discernment. Even just keeping the precepts can benefit the world. We say a lot that if everyone in the world kept half of the first precept, meaning not killing other humans, then already there would be world peace. And then if everybody kept the 5 precepts, you'd have some sort of deva world. You'd have a celestial world. If everybody acts like devas, then you have a deva realm. If everybody acts like ghosts, you have a ghost realm. And everybody acts like humans, you have a human realm. So, at least in the monastery, everybody is more or less deva-like. So we do have a miniature celestial realm here at Abhayagiri. And when we leave the monastery and teach or lead retreats, it's kind of like you can imagine like a deva going into the human realm or something like that, and trying to give out some deva energy. But then when people come here, you can come from that realm and actually come into the deva realm. That's even better. But I guess sometimes when we're in it, it's easy to forget. It's easy to kind of lose perspective. So I feel like not so much is coming to mind. I won't talk for too long tonight. And we do have the lunar observance night, so more time to meditate and contemplate. And anybody who is maybe has some work or appointments tomorrow, then the lunar observance night can be optional for you. Otherwise, for the rest of us, we can do our normal. Well, it hasn't been normal as of late because we've been so busy. We've been canceling a lot of the lunar observance nights, but tonight we can have more of a normal lunar observance night for those who are interested, and sitting and walking meditation until midnight. If there is anybody to make tea, then tea at midnight, and morning chanting at 3. So I will leave it at that.